Hi, welcome to Actuality Podcast. I'm the host, Dominic Wu, and beside me is the co-host, Christine Ingerson, and the guest, Aditi. Each week, we will have conversations with industry leaders to explore the unexpected connections and opportunities between diverse sectors in the world of spatial AI and XR. Today, our guest is Charlie Fink. Hey, Charlie, would you share a little bit about your background with us?
Sure. It's going to take a little while because I'm over 60 years old and I've been doing this stuff for 45 years. So you'll have to lean back while Professor Fink tells you a tale that started in 1981 when I was a graduate student at the Art Institute of Chicago. And in 1981, it's hard to think back and admire you all are and understand the world of 1981, but we were working with World War II equipment, and making images was hard, and making images was rare, and making images was expensive, and Hollywood had a monopoly on production of a sufficient quality for commercial distributions. Very, very different kind of world, right? We were still going to first run movies in movie theaters. You couldn't record television. There were no tapes. It was the beginning of satellite TV where you got one movie channel for like $20 a month. So imagine $20 a month in 1981. They're probably closer to $50 a month today.
Mhm.
So I got my degree in filmmaking. As I said, when we were in the green room, I met my wife there. So we've still been married we've been together 43 years and married 40 years next week. So yeah, I've been married probably long enough so that some of your listeners could be my grandchildren. Fortunately, my grandchildren are under 5 years old, so not that old yet. Anyway, from the Art Institute of Chicago, I started working on movies that were being shot in Chicago. It just happens to 1983. Oh, I should also say that I made a feature film when I was in graduate school because we were getting short ends, which means, instead of a 10-minute reel of raw film, you'd get the end. So, they recorded news, they only used half of it, and so they give away the other half to the local film school. So we had all these short ends. Of course, it was expensive to develop them, but I thought, oh, well, with all this stuff, I could make a feature film for $3,000. So why not? And, we improvised the whole thing. It sort of was like a strange reality TV kind of story, and it won awards all over the place, and nobody gave a shit. So then I started working on commercial movies in Chicago, and I was a location manager, I was a producer's assistant, and I ended up working with Gary Marshall on a movie called Nothing in Common, which featured Jackie Gleason and a very young Tom Hanks. For those of you who don't know who Jackie Gleason is, he was a very big movie star or TV star in the 50s and the 60s, and even into the 70s. He was quite an old man when he was in that movie. And he was the star of a television series that ran for about 10 years called The Honeymooners, about a couple who lived in a shabby one-bedroom apartment in New York, and he was a bus driver. And he spent most of his time threatening to beat his wife. So
That's
we
ominous.
lived in a very, very un-PC world. You have to understand. And
Yeah.
yet we thought about ourselves as enlightened. So of course, if my daughter were here, she'd be laughing right now, since Boomer generation does not appear that way to her. Anyway, as a result of working on that movie, Gary offered me a job in LA as his story editor. That sounds like a pretty good thing, right? What does a story editor do? Well, you run out for coffee, you gas up Gary's car, you read a lot of scripts, and every once in a while they let you sit in a meeting with a famous person and take notes.
Very
So,
glamorous. Very, very glamorous.
so it was very glamorous, but it got me out to Hollywood. And in those days, people got paid for doing that.
Mhm.
So, I had a basis for living in LA. Whereas today, those jobs are people are asked to do for free or part-time or, for a ridiculous $20 an hour. I mean, not enough to live on. Right. In those days, they paid you like $500, and the producers had a stipend for paying people like me from the studio. So it was great. I worked for him for 2 years, and then I networked my way into a job at Disney Animation at a moment when it was really being remade in 1986 into, that was the second golden age of Disney animation. I got tremendous training there. I worked with some of the best producers and executives in the world, including Peter Schneider and Jeff Katzenberg. I was there 11 years. I worked in animation, I worked in live action, and I worked on a very big VR project when I was at Imagineering, or division-ish of Imagineering, when I left. So first of all, I was responsible for developing The Lion King. It was based on my original idea, Bambi in Africa. And as a result of that, I was promoted to being the youngest creative vice president at the studio. So I was 29, probably. That lasted a couple of years, since the entertainment is a young person's business, right? Young people rise very fast in the entertainment business, but your career is over at 40. So you have to have, the ability to parlay what you've done into a career, second career, if you will, as a producer. So when the studio is done with you, you are by definition a producer. So having worked on this big VR project run by Tim Disney called Virtual World, we were using, because there were no headsets, we used what we called pods, which were modified flight simulators, and they were networked together, not in the sky, where it's very difficult to interact with other people. You're going 500 miles an hour. So we networked you, onto a desert planet to fight in a mech. We had another experience called Red Planet, where you were racing hovercrafts through the mining canals of Mars.
Wow.
And so we opened 30 locations on 4 continents in 3 years, which is unbelievably fast for location-based entertainment. But we were fighting against the creation of the internet. And the imagination of everybody in the world had shifted under our feet. And in the middle of all of that, I got recruited by America Online to be their senior vice president for original content. So I moved my whole family across the country, and I worked at AOL for 4 years. And they were the right 4 years to work at AOL. I left AOL. I started a company that did a customized homepage, if you will, like sending you the Yahoo homepage via email every day. Because in those days, the first thing everybody did, and in fact, the first thing that most people do today, is they go check their email along with social media and their other, did I get text messages, whatever. You're looking at the phone probably before you take your first pee in the morning. So, so the logic of that company was called E-Agents, is that you would choose your interests and it would be waiting for you in your inbox. And we had all sorts of partners like the New York Times. It was great. And we were partnered with Yahoo. They got 6 million people to sign up. So it was great. So American Greetings in Cleveland said, we want to buy that company. We want to build a big advertising business around them and our electronic greeting cards. So I became president and chief creative officer for American Greetings. And then the bottom fell out of the internet, right? It was I think the deal for my company closed a couple of months before that giant stock market crash around the overinflated expectations of the internet. So somehow we survived. We went through multiple layoffs. I thought I had sold my company for $40 million. Really, I had only sold it for $3 million, or at least $3 million ended up being my end. But when I was done at American Greetings in 2005, I was the non-executive chairman of the company. It was a public company. But I thought, oh my God, I have all the money I ever need. I did not set out to be a corporate executive. I thought I was going to make films. I want to do creative things. But I didn't want to make films. I, instead started working in commercial and non-commercial theater. And I pivoted away from tech. I missed the whole mobile revolution, which was the thing that really put the internet on steroids. And put social media on steroids. And by the way, is the reason that Hollywood is falling apart right now. And we can talk about that too. But so I was involved with the production of over 20 Broadway and off-Broadway shows. And one day I woke up and said, and I was running the New York Musical Festival as a chairman for most of that time, for 10 years. They gave me a really nice trophy or pack at the end. I could go get it. It's sitting over there. So for years and years and, you know, tens of thousands of dollars to keep that thing going. And I had nothing to show for it. And I thought, you know, this is a shitty business that I've chosen for myself. It's sort of creatively satisfying, but I'm getting killed financially. I'm spending most of my time raising money and trying to get butts in seats, which in the case of theater is so hard.
It
So
is.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
So so I thought, oh, this is crazy. I want to get back into tech. You know, when I look at my friend graph, these are all people that I had relationships with because we worked together. You know, that was the source of my social life, of my relevancy, in theater I thought was going to provide that for me, and it didn't. Not theater's fault. Theater doesn't care, and it will go on. It'll be just fine without a producer like me. I like doing things that I'm really good at. But, you know, I was a 55-year-old ex-CEO who hadn't been relevant in 10 years. And let me tell you, that's not a good starting point for a pivot back into tech, which is dominated by people your age. Because it, like,
and that was the time. Maybe that was the time. Maybe that was the time when all of the really young founders were the vogue, I'm guessing.
Well, so I started. Okay, funny story. Gary Vaynerchuk, the famous marketing executive and entrepreneur, who many of you may follow.
Yes, I know who that.
You know, he's become a media personality.
Definitely. Yes.
He wasn't at the time. He was running Wine Library. And somebody brought him by my office. So the Wine Library guy is going to be here at AOL. Do you want to meet him? I'm like, sure. So he stuck her head in. Do you have a minute for the Wine Library guy? Sure. And he comes, Gary, he's 15. I'm like, can you even drink the wine? It's my parents' liquor store.
Yeah. I didn't know that about him. Yeah.
So 10 years later, so now it's 20 years later, and I'm in an elevator in some renovated Soho hip tech lofty building, and the guy in the elevator leans over and says to me, I drink the wine now. And I'm like, oh my God, it's Gary Vaynerchuk. And he goes, yeah, you're the AOL guy. Remember our conversation?
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
You know, he said, come by the office. I got a copy of his book. He signed a really nice note. And I said, you know, I'm kind of between things and thinking about what to do. And I'm thinking about writing a book about my days at Disney. Everybody's always curious about the Lion King story. Maybe I'll write a story about that and what it was like to be a studio executive. Because that sounds interesting. How is your blog going? Can you send me a link? I'd love to read your writing. And I said, I don't have a blog. And he said, well, how are you going to write a book if you don't have a blog? And I thought, that is so fucking obvious. I am old. I am really fucking old that I needed to have that shoved in my face by one of the most accomplished people in our industry. So I took his advice and I started to write. So this is 2015, maybe. So 10 years ago. And I started to write. And, you know, that's kind of where I started out, kind of as a writer, because when you're starting out in the entertainment business, that's all you got, right? Is the ability to write a script.
Yeah.
And to show your love of the medium and whatever. I was not great at screenwriting, but I was very good at nonfiction writing. And actually, that's what I started out with.
Right from what you know, in a sense, maybe.
Yeah, so I felt like, okay, well, maybe this is right. Maybe I need to reset. So I started writing, and I wrote about everything. I wrote about theater, I wrote about politics, I wrote about Disney, I wrote about entertainment, and no one gave a shit what I had to say on any of those topics. Because there's plenty of thought leadership around social media and all of those things. So I was, you know, promoted my writing on social media. You know, you figure at my age, I was on Twitter since 2008, you know, that I have somebody who would care about what I have to say. It's like 600 followers. Today, I have over 30,000 just on Twitter or X. So I wrote about everything under the sun. And then I ran into a guy that I had worked with, you know, back in the 90s. And he said, dude, VR, it's VR. You know, Facebook just bought fucking Oculus. Where have you been? He's like, VR you were Mr. VR. at Disney, right? Everybody wanted a piece of you. Nothing has changed. So I thought, I went home and I said to my wife, Brian thinks I should be writing about VR. And she said, well, since you're not really satisfied with the results of writing what you want to write about, well, why don't you write about what Brian thinks you should write about? And I thought about it. Of course, I initially dismissed it, but a few weeks later, I started, well, look, I've got the internet. Let me just read up on this VR thing and see, how much of it is the same and how much of it is different. And I wrote this overly long, like 2,000 word plus story on Medium, following all the other unsuccessful posts. And I promoted it on social media, and it got more hits in 24 hours than all the other stories I had written that year, put together. So as you know, that's kind of a dopamine hit. That's like, oh shit, I'm going to keep doing this. So I thought, okay, well, it seems like people like what I have to say about VR. Let me write another story about it. Oh, this AR thing is kind of interesting. Let me write some stories about that. And all of a sudden, my Twitter was blowing up with followers. And this is in a matter of weeks of me starting to write about VR. And then the phone rings. Hey, Charlie, it's Louis Dvorkin. I'm like, Louis Dvorkin? And he goes, from AOL. We worked together at AOL. I'm now chief creative officer at Forbes. So he was a subordinate of a colleague of mine at AOL. I mean, I knew who he was. But we were acquaintances. We weren't hanging out. And now he's like 20 years later, this big mocker at Forbes. He goes, we need somebody to cover VR and AR who isn't a game guy. You're perfect. And the managing editor is going to call you. He hangs up. Managing editor suddenly offers me a job. So now I'm the VI. So they finally get me to the tech editor, right? And they basically say, listen, Charlie is Charlie. Just let him write whatever he wants. So they love me for that, especially since my guy who said that is gone within like 6 weeks of telling them to hire me. Louis Dvorkin has a great separate story I won't get into, but if you're interested in newsroom politics, Louis had a great run in the mid-teens, both at Forbes and at Tribune Company, where he was the uber editor of all of Tribune's publications before they conspired to execute him. And of course, it's one of those jobs, that you show up, you do the job for 3 months, and they're like, you know what? We made a mistake. Here's a big bag of money. Get the hell out of here. So that was Louis's story. But his most important act was enthroning me as the VR guy at Forbes in, the end of 2016. So I started writing for Forbes, and as a result of that, I got offered a book deal, and I said I would only do the book if it was an AR-enabled book, right? Because everything we do, our phone is sitting right next to us. So you can't really do color plates in a book. It's prohibitively expensive. But now you can do video. You can do volumetric content. So the book was filled with markers. You hold your phone over it, and little animations popped up, and the timing of it was perfect. It came out at the end of 2017, and it was called Charlie Fink's Metaverse. So when the actual metaverse happened 5 years later, I got a ton of speaking and consulting work out of it. Now, the thing about the metaverse book is it was the first AR-enabled book. It sold like crazy.
Yeah.
There were 3 printings of this book. It's irrelevant now. Nobody cares about a 7-year-old computer book, and everybody knows what mobile AR and Snapchat is and how all that works. But then nobody did. Then nobody knew you could have an AR tattoo. Nobody knew what web XR was. So, the book was entirely new, and it did really, really well. It was priced as a textbook, which is unfortunate because what they do, college students do, is they put it online. And even if they don't have a PDF version, they actually put photographs of the pages online because they're pissed at you for making them buy a $50 book. And everybody's textbook is online. Now, a lot of students get money through financial aid to buy the books, so they still kind of sell. But my books went up online so fast that even though people were assigning them all over the place in college courses, everybody used the free version, even in my own classes. But as a result of writing that book, I got a contract for another book. I got much more money for it, but it didn't sell very well. It wasn't new, it wasn't fresh. Again, too expensive a book. But that's what happens with everybody's second book. I wrote a third book later during the pandemic about remote collaboration that did well in its moment. So, and as a result of all these books and my master's degree, I got a job as a professor at Chapman University in Southern California, where I teach a course on cinematic AI and another course called Landscape of Emerging Media. And of course, you know, take your pick. If you put it in historical context, movies are emerging media. But I actually start the course with the internet. You know, and I mean, we've had two events that have really changed the world, and I'll conclude my whole rap and crazy bio here about me kind of improvising my way through my life. Oh, now I lost my so Landscape of Emerging Media, I start with the initial lecture. I start at the printing press, but really the course itself starts with the beginning of the internet. And here's what I was going to say. So I lived through the beginning of the internet, which was one of the biggest changes mankind ever experienced. I lived through the beginning of mobile, although I wasn't in the industry at that moment, but it was as impactful as the internet and has changed human behavior and relationships much more profoundly than the internet, the old internet by itself that didn't have the mobile aspect to it. And now we have generative AI. I never thought I would see in my lifetime another wealth creation opportunity on the scale of the internet or of mobile. But
Yep.
here we are. I may not be young enough to really take advantage of it, although I'm constantly looking for ways. You know, I always pivot today toward what is relevant. You know, and at the moment, AI is what's relevant, and I'm trying to use my platform on Forbes and my podcast and the relationships I've built up of being in the business for 10 years, mostly just to help others. And, you know, I'm hoping that I'll be able to find a path through AR, my own study and doing that and being able to leverage my platform and my reputation. But it's not easy. I'm not a data scientist. I don't have the kind also gave you access to your intelligent agent, right? Which is essentially the beginning of it. And what's driving Apple's stock price right now is the idea that Siri could actually do what they advertised it doing 10 years ago.
That's right. Yeah.
And of course it would be an incredible, powerful, oh my God, it would shop for you. What the hell would the value of that be?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
walking along the street and you could say, you know what, Alexa, please send me a box of tissues. I forgot it at the store. I mean, you're standing there looking at your refrigerator and you say things like, okay, so we need eggs, we need milk, we need orange juice. Just make it a list. And when you go to the grocery store, you're in the grocery store. And what do you know? It's got your list.
The convenience is unparalleled.
So, I mean, its potential to melt into everything and just be part of our reality the way mobile phones have, I think is unlimited. And I think it's really, those kinds of things are going to change the way we use our phones, right? The meaning of the devices we have is going to start to change. As Patty Mays said 10 years ago, and it's still true, we are becoming our devices. We are cyborgs.
That's a fascinating take. That's very interesting. What can you tell us more? Like what can you unpack that a bit?
Well, sure. Patty Mays is a professor at MIT Media Lab, and she supervises some amazing experiments about perception and memory and vision, specifically looking at computer vision and wearables and how do we turn life into a learning experience, right? How can kids wear glasses to school and be much smarter when they get there? Right.
Okay.
Imagine wearing glasses and getting a real-time translation of everything everybody says. You might learn Spanish in a month instead of 3 years. So those are the kinds of experiments that Patty does and her students do because somebody has to. And it is fantastic work. And she is very philosophical about that work and is trying to have a holistic view of how we live our lives and how technology gets integrated into it. So I was a big subscriber to her philosophy. Her original premise was we are addicted to our phones, right? We look at our phones 400 times a day.
As you said before, we pee in the morning. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We look at our phones 400 times a day. What are we looking for? There's no new news on the election in the past 3 hours.
And that's what people are afraid of, that it's gonna be dystopian and that people are just gonna be in VR headsets all the time. But I say I see it as like, when you really want that immersive experience, I think it's wonderful. Like, so
Patty's view though is
yeah,
that we're
but
living
not all
we're
the time.
living a schizophrenic digital life. I actually
Sure.
don't think anything that she's talking about is specific to VR, but it is specific to how
Yeah.
phones have changed us, and they have changed our interface, our visual interface
Mhm.
with the world, because we keep flipping back and forth between physical world and the digital reality in our hands. So she feels like that makes displays inevitable, right? Why not be Homo erectus and not Homo look downus? So I was a subscriber to that point of view for many years. She's so brilliant and she expresses it so well. She wrote a chapter for my second book, Convergence. She is absolutely one of the most insightful scientists working in the field today. That said, I'm not sure she's right about this.
So what's changing your mind now?
I have a very nice screen in my life. And it's optional. It doesn't sit up here interrupting me. It's only in my life when I choose to put it in my life. So I don't know that I need so when we talk about this wearable headset that's the home to our agent and the home to our sensors, both of which we will most certainly have, what is the display for? So I'm just asking, right? Because the applications and the demonstrations I see, I get directions from here and from my car really well. I never feel like I need them in my glasses, right? I wouldn't construct a whole headset to do that. I'm not a fighter pilot. I just want to know which way to go when I get out of the subway. So, you know what, I mean, for men, I mean, I guess if you're cooking and, keep looking at the menu and that ain't so helpful. So, I mean, maybe, but that's what I call an intermittent use that could be offloaded onto the phone.
So
because sorry, go ahead.
No, Christine, go for it.
So, because I was just thinking of Apple Vision
Pro. This is a contrarian view. People get very activated.
No, it's interesting to me. No, because the Apple Vision Pro, when it came out, it was almost like, well, the desktop is not in your face. I'm like, yeah, but what if you don't work that way? Because honestly, even though I love VR, I don't want to be in it all day. Like, I see it just for like that certain experiences, certain purposes, and when I want to be fully immersed. Because VR I agree with you.
It's the ultimate vehicle for being together with people when you have to be.
Yes.
And definitely. The pandemic was actually a very profound thing for VR. We weren't quite ready for prime time, right? The Quest 1 had just come out, and most of the websites that were built for collaboration were new and untested, as were the people who were brought into VR because of it. But I taught in VR, I socialized in VR, I spent 12 hours a week in VR during the pandemic, and it was terrific. And now I am in my VR headset, basically only when I have to be. Right. Tomorrow there's a performance being done by a group called the Ferryman Collective. Which
I registered the Tuesday one. They have like a brand new day, like a new.
They did something really wonderful a couple of years ago called Gumball Dreams.
Oh yeah, I joined that theater. It's amazing. I really love
Deirdre Sullivan and
Leo,
her husband. Steve Butchko and a couple of other people. I'm trying to remember their names. It's a great company of talented people. So yeah, but again, it's better on your PC. So I have to pull out my gaming PC, which I pull out like 3 times a year. So it's just, there's a lot of friction, and it has to be something that you really, really want to do. It was easy to play walkabout mini golf all the time and get good at it during the pandemic. Love that game. They keep adding to it. I love that game. The company Mighty Coconut is so ambitious and so imaginative. Their pushing the envelope of making VR environments. They're the physics of the putting is amazing and amazingly accurate, and I hardly ever do it, like twice a year, because I just don't have my VR headset on. There's too much friction. It's like I got too many other things to do. It's funny. One of my students, who is a VR minor at Chapman, expressed it to me this way: I have appointments with my other screens.
Yeah, and I
How
think
do you, yeah, go.
I think that, but I mean, Meta is the canary in the coal mine for everybody, and they've spent a lot of money on it.
yeah,
I think it is not to be a game machine. I think everybody, when Meta started out, the thinking was, well, first, it's a first adopter device. First adopters are gamers. Let's build lots of great games for the device. But the truth is, gamers prefer console games. The headset games aren't as good as console games. They're not as good of value.
okay.
There's not as much gameplay in them. So the
Maybe
number of gamers and the amount of attrition and the lack of killer app. We don't have any Game of Thrones. There's no VR game equivalent of Game of Thrones, right? Where you just say, I don't care how much friction there is. I'm going to buy it. I'm going to get cable. I am going to do whatever it takes to get that. We don't have that in VR.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that would be, honestly. And I don't think, by the way, Apple does. And I think that's when Apple had to ship this device to the million developers that are in its ecosystem, in the hope that one of them will invent Uber.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, but otherwise, I don't, I mean, the 3D that it does is really good. But there's no content for it yet. And it's sort of the chicken and the egg. It's so expensive, it's so difficult, but there's no audience for it. So why would you go through that?
Yeah. And I guess, it's an overall challenge of a new technology having in its maybe like alpha, beta, very, very early nascent stages, having to compete with a stable, very mature technology that has, as mobile phones have received investment for decades now, and they're very mature. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see that challenge happen. And Charlie, since we have you on here, I definitely wanted to ask you about XR and entertainment.
Yes, that's me too.
Yeah, go for it, Christine.
Well, yeah. How is it influencing creatives is what I would really like to know. Yeah.
Well, AI
I think that's
creates very, very trippy images. Some of them evoke so much nostalgia because they look like every image you've ever seen mashed together. So they are very familiar images. Like, I've seen that before. It's uncanny, really. I don't think anybody has yet artistically harnessed that quality of it. Everybody seems to be wanting to make it do more tricks in the service of narrative storytelling, which is great. But they're the visual artists who are capturing things like Nice Aunties is one of the foremost AI creators, as is another company called Visual Dome, and they have a lot of followers on social media, and they really are not trying to make movies as we know them. They're trying to do things which are unique to AI and trying to interrogate it artistically.
You tell us, can you give us an example, like paint the picture for us a little bit?
Well, sure. I mean, Nice Aunties is based on old and middle-aged Asian women doing impossible things like, pushing a house-sized clove of garlic up a mountain.
I love that. I just love it.
I would encourage everybody to go find Nice Aunties because they're doing something that could only be done with AI.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of other people want to make a movie because they don't have the means of production, and AI can substitute for that. And that is a very different thing. And then there's a whole third thing, which nobody's really doing yet. I saw one example of it called the Golden Key at South by Southwest, where it won the best award for immersive experiences. but it used, they were running stable video locally, which used just a ginormous amount of power. And they had some very, very big boxes there with NVIDIA cards in them that, had to have their own air conditioning. And by air conditioning, I don't mean a little fan you have in the back of your computer. I mean a literal room-sized air conditioner.
Yeah, like a whole.
That is how hot those cards are running
Wow.
stable video, a latency-free version of stable video with very minimal prompts. So essentially what they did was, what is the best way to just get it to hallucinate? Right? And you just set some music against the hallucination and you just say to it, The King and I, 30 minutes. And it just free associates, it mashes periods together, the characters are inconsistent. It's crazy. I mean, you just sit there watching it, you're like a cat and a mirror. You're just sitting there, like it was mesmerizing. So I think there is something to that, right? Maybe there's a YouTube channel where you are the star of this continuously hallucinated film that has not so much as a story, but a theme.
It can make everyone the main character. Like it really feeds
Like
our collective main character.
Maybe every night after work, Dominique wants to go home and pour herself a glass of wine and tell her display that she wants to see the story of her success again.
Again, I'm in the process.
I had a really hard day.
Success.
Please show me how successful I am.
I mean, we're laughing, but a lot of people watch action movies because they want to live that life, right? Like they want to be the hero or the heroine who is.
Well, that's the whole basis of all narrative entertainment, is that we want to find out what happens next. If you're in a scene and you're not anticipating what happens next, you're not interested, then the film is over. Right? It's sort of like you have to say, what is going to happen to this character next? And you may be relating to that character as a bad guy. Is he going to get away with it? Or a good guy, where is he going to catch the bad guy and resolve his relationship with his daughter? Right. But it's sort of a magic box, if you will. Right? Once you open the box, the mystery is over.
Is done. Yeah. But then with AI, you can have so many different doors.
But you can't predict. You can't predict it because it's hallucinating. I suppose once we know it better, then its hallucinations might make more sense to us. But right now we don't, and it's just crazy. So I get very excited about that. I mean, the thing I'm describing, it's too much compute. I described the amount of compute it was taking up at South by Southwest. So you can imagine what it would take to get it through the pipe into your MacBook. We're not there yet. But and of course, to put it in your MacBook, you'd need local repeaters. And oh my God, the idea of scaling it, is, really hurts your brain. I mean, that really is data engineering and, understanding how far electricity goes. And
it's true.
Stuff that is way above my pay grade. So there's some things, although I will tell you something funny. I make all my students learn what's inside of a computer because most people don't know. Right? They never in high school, nobody ever said to them, you need to know the 10 things that are inside your computer.
Yeah, and how they work together and what each part does.
I think most people just use it and they think it's it's sort of like a car, right? If the car, if it breaks down, they take it to a mechanic and he says, your motherboard is fried. It's sort of like saying, yeah, your transmission has had it. Yeah, what do I know about a transmission?
You have a coolant leak. Yeah.
Or the cloud.
What people would say is, what is my motherboard? Where is it? How did it get fried? Right. They don't have the first idea what's inside their computer. So it is kind of crazy because, I could barely wire up my stereo when I was in high school. And yet I've had to change. Everybody has had to, whatever their incentive. This is a world of devices and science, and you got to know your way around a phone and your way around a computer. Sometimes my daughter sees me texting and, I'm pretty proficient and she'll take my phone away from me because she can text it so much faster. And also, what other old people do is we use voice dictation.
Mhm,
Voice
mhm.
Oh, yeah.
dictation sometimes gets horribly garbled.
It does.
So
Yeah.
kids are always, showing memes on social media. This is the text my mom just sent. Any possible translations?
But I applaud everyone who tries to stay current with technology, like whatever their age, because it's hard, like you build habits, you get used to one set of
It
things.
depends on your personality. I mean, I have a lot of my peers and friends, when I start talking about
Mhm.
AI, they're like, stop. Stop the world. I want to get off.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It
And
can be scary. Yeah.
yeah, and people are happy with their phones and their computers, and they don't need to know about XR, and they don't need to know about AI. Although I have to say, I mean, ChatGPT has made my job as a writer so much easier.
Mhm.
We're not supposed to use ChatGPT at Forbes, and of course, arguably, I'm only using it for research because I do touch every sentence before it's
Mhm.
published. But the actual um, writing becomes more gathering of information and editing it than it becomes fully synthesizing it, which I would have to do before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
talk
true.
about ChatGPT. I think I recently used Perplexity. If you take a look, it's amazing for research.
Yeah. Yeah, I use
Yes.
Perplexity. I got a free pro subscription actually, so I've been using it a lot. By the way, I belong to Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini, and Perplexity. So I don't use Anthropic's Claude. I've played with it in the past. It is definitely ChatGPT-like. Of course, I use all the image generators and the animation generators because I teach that. It's really interesting. I teach that, and I keep
Mhm.
thinking there are a few little films I want to make, and I never make my own films. I don't have the patience for it. I don't really care that much. Um, so, uh, anyway, so instead I help my students do it because they are full of ideas. I mean, I am always amazed by the ideas that they have, and some of them really are truly brilliant. I've had a couple of students that I thought, oh, this person's really brilliant. Some great things should happen for her.
Mhm.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't happen when they're supposed to. But I've had some students that have gone on to be very successful. Of course, they were going to go on to be very successful, whether I had crossed paths with them in my class or not. So I can't take credit for doing anything than recognizing them. So
What do you see? Talk about like education. What do you see like a AI in education sectors? Because I talked to a bunch of teachers, and some people embrace them, some people doesn't like it. They prefer the way it is, and they were worried about the hallucination. And yeah, what do you see the AI, for example, chatbot to help like
it
teacher?
is inevitable that everybody will use AI to do homework. That is the dumbest, easiest thing to do. And you know what AI does really well? You know what? Usually a first draft paper from AI sucks, right? So you have to know the content that you want to
Yep.
be a diligent editor.
Yeah.
But you also need to be really good at prompting. So that is something that people can learn as they go through school. But it's a big shortcut. Everybody's going to use it. They're going to
Mhm.
use it in high school. They're going to use it in college. So pretending it doesn't exist is, I think, certainly something that will happen as it always does with new technology. But the power of that technology is going to triumph because it's going to take what we're already doing and make it much, much better and easier. So that is the fundamental condition a technology needs to thrive. So fulfilling that condition makes it completely inevitable. So let's teach people how to use it. Let's teach people how to be diligent editors.
Mhm.
Let's definitely have people in rooms where they have no computers and they have to learn how to read and write
Yeah.
and have logic. I'm not saying that people should stop reading and writing, although this will have a terrible impact on reading and writing. That said, somebody pointed out to me, I was lamenting the lost skill of reading, and somebody pointed out to me, you're wrong, Charlie. People are reading more than they ever have.
What do they mean? What do they mean?
Phones,
Yeah.
phones, right? Every moment is filled,
Sure.
right? You're
Yeah,
reading text messages, emails, the instructions and descriptions around YouTube videos that you watch, reading all day. So we read much more than we ever have. I actually reflected on that, but it's actually true. People are reading on social media. You're bombarded with writing everywhere. It's much more information than people have ever had to absorb before. Socrates used to think that books would be bad because they would force knowledge out of people's heads, right? That your mind is a bookshelf, and then if you put too much in it, shit pours out of your ear, and you no longer can use that knowledge. He didn't understand, what cognition was and the way that it manages, the way the brain manages information.
Yeah, and another question is that according to the research, that teenagers read less and less, more like a long text format, which helps them to, for example, like read the literature, all those like I would say human assets. Just like you mentioned that Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they use like phones, and we all know that what's on TikTok, it's pretty much dopamine, and there's nothing that related to something that is very, I would say, foster critical thinking and also access to humans' great assets. What do
Well,
you
I mean,
see?
I
How?
just,
Yeah,
social media has eaten Hollywood. We spend more time scrolling through our feeds than we do looking at
yeah,
professionally produced content.
yeah.
And Hollywood is falling apart because of that. They did not understand the consumer. They thought social media was there to promote movie stars. They did not understand social media was the thing itself. And
Storytelling medium.
promoting
media.
manufactured TV shows and slick movies was going to no longer be the preferred method of consuming entertainment. Movies are special, movies are great, but movies are not something you're going to do all the time. Most people are not watching streaming content on their phones. They're looking at social media. So that's why big tech is going to absorb Hollywood, because Hollywood did not understand social media. And now it's late in the game. They're going to have to acquire people. They're going to have to shrink. They're going to have to change. I think Paramount is the first domino that's going to fall. Disney is much harder to see, but Disney is also very good at diversifying. They're trying all different ways to save their ESPN business because, again, nobody needs cable anymore. That's not the way we consume content. We don't consume content from the TV guide that you give us. Fuck your TV guide and fuck your network programming. How about that?
Yeah, I just recently, because like assassin, right? Trump got assassin. And I find out that before I was like my intention first way is to watch the news and also Google it. But I find out that all the information was blocked by Google immediately. So that's why I go to X, Twitter. And Twitter has all the facts and people screenshot. And I feel like, wow, now everybody's on Twitter and trying to figure out who's the murderer instead of Google or watch like a CNN or Fox, because we all know which party they belong. So I find out it's very, very interesting to see, wow, now people trust about the gossip than, people like officially say something, because we all believe there might be something, and people just, I feel like it's hard for people to.
Killing the gatekeepers has always been a mission in my life, but the truth is I wanted to be the gatekeeper.
What do you mean?
Well, when we were inventing the internet, right? I was that, in the late 80s or early 90s was when the internet was being invented. And both at Disney and AOL and elsewhere, I was one of the people involved in inventing what the hell we were going to do with the internet and what we weren't going to do. And we were thrilled to, in the olden days, if you made news, it was because somebody at a network or at a newspaper decided that you were worthy of it. And they rated you in a lot of ways. Was the information true? Will it be interesting? Is it relevant?
Mhm.
right? But there was a gatekeeper. I'm going to choose 30 minutes of news. I am
Yep.
going to choose the contents of the newspaper today. And
Right.
those were the gatekeepers. And the
Mhm.
internet assassinated all of them. They were all kicked out of their jobs
Mhm.
by the
Mhm.
internet, right? And we were thrilled. Now the truth can be free. And
Yeah.
not once did Mark Andreessen or Steve Case or any of those brilliant guys, not once did anybody say, well, we've set the truth free, but what about lies? Aren't they also free?
Mhm. Mhm.
And now we live in a world where we really don't always know what's true anymore.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's going to continue to get worse and worse. So one of the questions that we need to ask is, for example, um, is the U.S. can the U.S. Constitution survive the internet and mobile phones and AI?
How do
And
you
I ask that as an open question. I have no idea. At moments, it looks very bad.
what do
And
you
I,
think
yeah,
the
and I think the most crucial question is that people who are the senator or who set up the law doesn't know technology. For example, if you hear the hearing of some senators questioning some tech leaders about their thing, and you can tell like one of the question that still in my mind is that one senator asked Mark Zuckerberg, what do you do? What does Facebook do? And he said, we sell ads. It's like, wow, you don't even know what Facebook do, and you are setting up the laws for AI and all those stuff protecting us. So that's why Berkeley recently have a like an AI focus for lawmaker training. I think that's amazing because and they integrate a lot of people, tech teacher
Yes.
in. So I
Well, of
find out
course, they
that
have
all
the
the
benefit of being just down the street from Silicon Valley.
yeah,
And
right.
also a big part of California's economy is technology. So it makes sense that our legislators here in the state have access to more information than they do on the other side of the country. So I need to get going. I actually,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
I had kind of a hard stop this morning, but is there anything else we want to talk about in the last 5 minutes or so?
Yeah. Anybody? Christine,
Um,
Aditi? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll take you to another piece of news we were discussing. So Lufthansa has a partnership with Meta in which they offer MetaQuest 3 headsets for, it's a small pilot specific travelers. Uh, but I'm curious about your take because this is a very different way that entertainment is happening and entertainment with XR. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts about this.
I think that it's not going to be a successful experiment because everybody is perfectly comfortable watching their TV. And if they are gamers and they care about it, they would be carrying their own device.
Anyway, yeah.
So if they came to me in Lufthansa, I don't carry my device anymore unless I think there's some event or meeting or something that I need it for.
Mhm.
In fact, I rarely bring it to class anymore.
Mhm.
So I suppose there are people who've never tried it or they're traveling with kids in business class, I guess.
Mhm.
And, I think they'd offer those kids a headset and they would look up from their Nintendo Switch and say, I'm covered.
I'm good.
So,
So,
other airlines have, I think KLM did this. Other airlines have tried it. They're trying to package headsets with cars. There's a company
mhm.
called HoloRide that does that. They had
Yeah.
a deal
I
with Audi, I think, but it hasn't happened yet.
What do you see? For example, Meta Connect. Rumor has said that they are going to launch their new glass, like a Orion project. What do you see about the new?
Again, I am a big fan of Ray-Ban stories, or I guess they just call them Meta
Mhm.
Wayfarers.
Mhm.
They look great, they feel great. They fixed the audio problem. I had the first version, the audio was terrible, and I was coming off of Bose frames where the audio is great. Um, I like that they're thinking about the cameras as sensors. The application right now is very janky,
Mhm.
but it's the right idea. As I said, putting sensors on glasses are a great vehicle, but you could put them in your shirt buttons if you wanted. But glasses are obviously uh, more obvious and will obviously your shirt gets wrinkled, the sensor. So if you need computer vision, you want it to have a stable platform.
Mhm.
So I'd like to see them doing more with that. I think they will. From a display standpoint, I'm interested in their display, and I'm interested in what they think the applications for that display would be. We will see. There are other companies coming out with displays, Google, Samsung, others that I'm under NDA about, but they're, the fall and Christmas season of 2024 will have a contingent of these new kind of glasses. I don't know how they're going to do. I mean, we have glasses out there in the Nreals that are quite good and very well thought through and have been tested with tens of thousands of users. So, they've sold 1 million of them. So this is a very, very smart company, and that's how far they've gotten. So how much farther is Meta going to get? I mean, I can't wait to see it. That's what I would say. Do I think they'll demo something? Probably. I think, they love to trot these things out. It's good for the stock price. It might be 18 months away or maybe never away. They have been known to demo technology that they're actually not working on. They've gotten to a good demo and you can see what it would be, but they're actually not making it. Right? They demoed, we were talking about BuilderBot. They demoed BuilderBot was like in 2021 or 2022. So, I mean, it was one of those things like, yeah, what if we could do this? Yeah, that would be great, but they're not actually working on it. So, when I see this display so expensive, so difficult to do, I just don't know that, the Ray-Ban was like $220 or something. That thing with the display is going to be 1,000 something. So I don't know. I don't know. I hope it's great. I mean, if it's great enough, the price will not be a barrier. People buy, I'm using a $2,000 computer right now. I mean, I buy lots of expensive gadgetry. So maybe we'll see. I mean, others are coming out with glasses and they will all have a unique value proposition. But I don't know if it's gonna like AI or like mobile take what we're already doing and make it better. That's what it's got to do. So I don't know. I do think the Meta Wayfarers are a great product and one that they can definitely build on. So I'm definitely interested in what they're going to build, and if it's a screen, I mean, what kind of a screen? Is it monocular? Is it binocular? Is it see-through? Is it not see-through? One of the things I always thought it would be great for is consuming sports. So, I'm on my dog walk. I want to watch the Dodgers game, not listen to it on the radio. Can we do that? Is it something I really would do? I don't even know. So, like I said, I have a lot of questions about the application of these wearable displays. Wearable AI and AR make a lot of sense to me, but I already have a display. So give me a reason to have the display on my face. It's not to mirror everything on my phone. So we'll see. We'll see if that can be developed. It would be exciting. MetaConnect is often exciting. I love that. I mean, look, Mark Zuckerberg is one of the richest people in the world, and he's super, super engaged with his job and his mission. So, at times I hate him. I think his company is no moral compass. And other issues that all stem from him and his management style. Yet, let me say, were it not for Mark Zuckerberg and his guts and vision, the four of us would not be here having this conversation right now. And the chances are I would be doing something very different, and so would you. So,
I agree with
whatever you want to say about Mark Zuckerberg, he may have bought Oculus, but he invented this industry. Yeah. Without that investment from Meta, it would have failed once again.
Wow. Yeah.
Mark Zuckerberg giveth and Mark Zuckerberg taketh away. I mean, we live in a weird time where there's just this handful of people who really, influence the industry in a disproportionate way. Tim Cook, Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, there are many others, of course, behind the scene who we don't know, but the ones that we know exert a lot of influence. Mark Andreessen, Peter Thiel, of course, Elon Musk. I mean, I feel like sometimes in my reporting, all I'm doing is writing about Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
you
that's a
so
good place
much.
to end. Thanks
Yeah.
for inviting me on the show. I really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much, Charlie. We learned a lot from you, and thank you so much for your time and all your insights.
My pleasure. And of course, let's end with a plug for my own podcast.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Hosted every Friday afternoon, This Week in XR, hosted by myself, Roni Abovitz, and Ted Shilowitz, well-loved studio executive and co-founder of Red Camera. So we have a good time. We have lots of great industry guests, and we bat around the week's news to get everything started. So I enjoy doing it every week. And by the way, we just celebrated our 200th episode. So we've been doing the show since the summer of 2020. Yeah, so it's great. We built a nice following, and I hope you are too.
Congratulations.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye-bye, you guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
All right, well, there you've got a tale. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you
Let
so
me
much.
know when it's posted, and I'll promote it on my channels.
Cool.
Sounds great. Great
Awesome.
to meet
Thank
you.
you.
Have a
Yeah.
good weekend. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Yeah. Cool. We can, yeah, I mean, yeah. So
We can wrap
how,
up also. Yeah.
yeah. How, oh, okay, cool. So let me wrap it up. Yeah, thank you so much. That's it for the episode. Thank you for listening. We release episodes weekly. If you enjoy this conversation, check out our other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Support us by giving us a follow and 5 stars rating, or subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Thank you so much, and see you next time.